It started when I was 5 or 6 years old, which would have been around 1988 or 1989. I used to see what I called the Bloody Man walking up and down the stairs in my house. I can't remember his face. I'm not sure if that's because I never looked at it or because he didn't have one. I just remember that it never happened in the middle of the night. It was always right around bedtime. He wore a hospital gown and had a bloody bandage wrapped around his head. I remember knowing even then that what I was seeing wasn't right, but I wasn't scared. I don't know if that lack of fear came from being told not to be scared, or if I was just too young to understand fear yet. But years later, I would learn that the person I was seeing was my uncle. He had been beaten in the head with a baseball bat. He came home afterward, went to sleep. His brain swelled, and the family found him in the morning. He was taken to the hospital where he died. This happened in August 1982. I was born in December 1983. I saw the Bloody Man somewhere between 15 and 30 times. Eventually, my mom and I moved out to get our own place. This had been my grandfather's house, and after we moved, I was gone for about 5 years. When I was 12 or 13, we moved back into that house. I never saw the Bloody Man again, but it was far from the last experience I would have there. About 6 months after moving back, I was in my bedroom showing my little sister how to play Sonic the Hedgehog. As I was explaining the game to her, a female voice, clear as day, said her name. My sister stood up, walked to the door, and said, "Yes, ma'am." I was frozen in fear, and there were 2 reasons for that. First, I knew for a fact that the voice wasn't my mom's. It was my grandmother's, and she had been dead for 10 years. Second, what my sister didn't realize was that the voice hadn't come from the hallway. It came from right at our feet, at the foot of the bed. I just sat there while my sister called for my mom. Of course, our mom said she was just washing dishes and never said anything. My sister looked strange when she walked back to the bed. "I hate those stupid stairs," she said. "The Bloody Man is scary." I immediately asked her who told her about the Bloody Man. She was shocked that I knew who he was and started crying, swearing that she really saw him and that no one else had told her the story. She was 5 years old, the exact same age I had been when I started seeing him. Shortly after the night we heard the voice, my bedroom door began to shake during sleepovers. At first, we thought it might be my stepfather messing with us, but we would open the door while it was shaking, and no one would be there. And once we realized that, it became absolutely terrifying. For about a year, the door would shake violently, and horrible claw-like scratching sounds would drag down the surface. My friends and I would scramble to the corner of the bed, fighting to hide while it happened. So if you're keeping count, that's 2 of us who saw the Bloody Man, and at least 3 of us who witnessed the shaking and scratching at the doors. But believe it or not, the last part of the story is even crazier. About a year later, we sold the house and moved a couple cities away. Sometime after the move, I told my mom how surprised I was that she sold her childhood home. She said that some of the bad memories had eventually replaced the good ones. Plus, she said, Grandpa was really starting to creep me out toward the end. Apparently, he had started to see the bloody man too. His own son. Almost 10 years later, the man who bought that house ran into my uncle's old gym buddy and said that he, his wife, and 2 of his kids had been seeing my uncle around the house. After hearing that, I made it a point to walk past the house whenever I could. And one day, I caught one of the sons as he was leaving. I introduced myself and asked him what they had experienced. He told me he had been too young at the time to fully remember, but his mom, dad, and 2 brothers would constantly see my uncle standing behind them in mirrors. When they got rid of all the mirrors, it stopped. I don't really understand that part, he said. Mirrors had nothing to do with it for me. But still, that's 4 people from an entirely different family who also saw and heard the same things. And I'd give anything to understand exactly what the hell went on in that house for all those years. The main thing I remember is my parents' voices. I don't remember seeing the ghost the first time. At night, sound traveled differently in our house. During the day, the doors and walls muffled things, but after bedtime, everything carried. You would know if somebody moved their chair in the kitchen or shut a cabinet somewhere in the house. And you would know when my father's voice dropped low and my mother's grew sharp. I learned early that when the voices started, sleep wasn't coming. I was old enough to know they weren't yelling at me, but that didn't matter. That was when I first noticed something in the hallway. It stood at the far end, where the stairs turned down toward the living room. A shape where the dark felt thicker. I couldn't make out any details. As I squinted, the voices downstairs stopped. The house went quiet, and the shape was gone. After that, I started noticing patterns. It never came on calm nights. It never appeared when my parents laughed or we watched television together. Only when something was wrong, when the voices rose and words snapped and doors slammed. If the argument was short, it would appear briefly, but if it dragged on, the shape would stay longer, though it never came into my room. I started sleeping with my door open, even though I hated the way the hallway looked at night. I needed to know where it was. If I could see the place it stood, I could feel safer knowing it wasn't any closer. I told myself that if I stayed very still, it wouldn't notice me noticing it. When I was younger, I thought the ghost caused the bad nights. It was easier to believe something bad lived in the house than to believe the house itself was unhappy. Easier than believing the people inside it were. The ghost gave fear a shape, a place to point it. When my parents argued worse and worse, the shape felt closer. I never told anyone about it. Kids learn which fears are worth sharing. I couldn't stand the thought of someone telling me it wasn't real, because then the fear would have nowhere to go. There was one night when the fighting was worse than usual. I remember that clearly. The voices didn't stop. They broke and restarted over and over, like someone picking at a wound. I lay in bed waiting for the shape to appear, but it didn't. The hallway stayed empty. Dark, but empty. And that was worse than any other night. Without it, the fear spread everywhere. I found myself crying and wishing for the shape back. I wished for it to stand there and take some of the weight with it. Eventually, the house went quiet on its own, and I fell asleep sometime after. I don't really remember when the ghost stopped coming. There wasn't a final night. As an adult, I've tried to make sense of it. I know now how memory works, how kids can invent explanations when reality feels too big. I know how easy it can be to turn emotion into imagery and fear into figures. Now I've stood in that hallway as an adult. The spot where the ghost used to stand is just a normal place. There's nothing special about it. But sometimes, when I hear voices rising, that same awareness begins to settle in my chest. I don't see the ghost anymore. I just know when it would have been there. And I understand now that whether I invented it or not doesn't really matter. It stayed where I needed the fear to stay. It kept it from being everywhere at once. It let a child believe a house was haunted instead of broken.